Our next panel discussion, rather, the panel member who would like to go ahead and speak is Mr. Navin Surya, founder and director, Soham Bharat Digital Payments, to throw some light on the new umbrella entity. So here's requesting and introducing Mr. Navin Surya to please join in.
Hi. Hello, Mr. Hota. How are you? Hi, Ankita. Hi, good to see you. Oh, I thought it was a standalone talk. It wasn't a panel, but if Mr. Hota is around, I'll be very happy and delighted to take his support.
So we've actually got the esteemed people here. I mean, you can go ahead, and I'm sure they will join in for sure.
Sure. So I think it's an interesting topic, very close to my heart. And as I said, this is also my new gig that I'm starting, which is a new umbrella entity. There are 3 points that I've been asked to kind of cover in a brief talk of about 15-20 minutes. The first one is that what's the context or an industry overview before we even jump into the new umbrella entity? What could you expect from these entities and how it is going to impact the overall ecosystem? So starting with the first point, if you look at the digital payments industry today, how big it is. If you take the RBI annual report of kind of 2019-20, which was published a few months back, it has a section on Payment and Settlement Systems Act. And within those systems, there is a data completely disclosed transparently, which talks about today that organized part of the retail payment or the entire payment in the countries to the extent of 1700 lakh crores. It's quite big and it's been growing. And if you look at over a decade, it's, I think, been growing almost between 35 to 40% CAGR year on year on an average. And obviously there are products which have been growing still in a very healthy 2-digit. And then there are products who have grown even, let's say very high 3 digits as well, depending on the life cycle they have been. So industry has been in a good shape, healthy growth, doing very well. The challenging part, however, remains that the digital consumption or let's say consumption in our country and paid in digital form is still about 18%, which means the consumers who consume various things still pay using physical cash for more than 80% of their spends in the country. So that's one challenge that we're still looking at, which also is actually interestingly an opportunity and let's say also a challenge for everybody to look at. The second bit, which I think was briefly mentioned by Mr. Hota in your previous panel, that the number of customer, there is lack of clarity. There are different reports which talk different numbers, and that also kind of alludes to the number of digital users on various other platforms. If you want to kind of take a range, because nobody has 100% accurate data on that, you're still talking about 100 to 150 million consumers. So you're talking about 10 to 15 crore consumers who are actually today using digital payments. Now, if you look at this number against the total population and payment being a subject which is literally covers every person in the country, I mean, except those who can't, who's just born and can't talk or don't get the pocket money yet. So let's say you keep kind of 4-5% population out, but literally everyone has to use money in some form or other. And that means that that's the largest target segment for any service. So if you look at the number of users and where we have to go, it's a pretty big challenge. For vision of our country, which is actually being a digital India or a digital Bharat, it cannot happen without money also being digital. And they go hand in hand. If they both have to go hand in hand, then in a decade or so to achieve this mission, we need to at least have about 50 to 60 crore or 500 to 600 million consumers using digital payments, which also means that our consumption, which is just about 18-20% in digital, has to at least reach 40 to 50% in digital. And these are like minimum numbers. Now, if you look at the past history, trend, growth, and if we say that given the current ecosystem, if the same thing continues, we are doing fairly well. Probably if we have to kind of achieve that target, it will still take us at least 2.5 to 3 decades, which means 25 to 30 years. And that's where I think RBI has been looking at that the job and the task in hand for the entire ecosystem is still kind of a very, very big. And probably it requires a lot more, let's say, participation from more entities, more ideas, more thoughts. And the tremendous work that Mr. Hota's team at NPCI and now under Dilip's guidance that they have done is actually given RBI a much more confidence that can we expand this model to a lot more participation, more people. And the kind of growth that they have achieved, especially in the last decade, can it be accelerated by adding, we don't know how many players eventually will be there, but let's say hypothetically, if you have to achieve this kind of a target that we just talked about, let's say about 50 to 60 crore customers and about 40 to 50% digital consumption, then and if you have to achieve it, let's say instead of about 25 to 30 years, about 10 to 15 years, then you'd easily need about 3 to 5 players, depending on how big they are and what kind of ideas they're coming up to reach there. And that actually becomes a very big and interesting point, and kind of the reason where the NUE was kind of the draft guidelines were set up. Now the final guidelines are out. The February 26, 2021 is the deadline for entities, those who are interested, those who are qualifying with 3 years experience in payments, with appropriate capital in play, minimum 50 crore at the time of application, 500 crore plus tied up. With all those qualifying criteria, with your best ideas, if you can go, you could try and get a license. That's what that's been put up. Personally, I believe that there has been a number of steps that RBI has been taking in the right direction, and this is probably one of the top of the agenda and within that list of a big move that RBI has made. And we're seeing tremendous interest already from many players like me, and who are all looking at this opportunity very closely. And like Mr. Hota said, that this is not going to put any kind of a risk to NPCI. Rather, I remember early days when NPCI was getting set up, and I used to get regularly call from media that would it mean now the Visa MasterCard road will be set in the country? Will there be no business for them now, since NPCI will be backed by RBI, industry, government, everyone? The reality today, and even I didn't believe that, and I used to correct them. And today there is a fact good, there is a historical data that all three entities have actually expanded the market, grown the market, and everybody has benefited with this innovation, competition, and actually the number of new products that have come out in last decade or so. So there is already a history that it's a misnomer half the time that somebody thinks that few more entities coming will risk the existing system. That's not the case, because one fundamental principle about these network entities or umbrella entities is they are all interoperable, which means that any of the existing products that these entities have done, the standards are already set. If others want to do it, they have to follow the same standard, which means you're interacting with them, you're adding to those volumes, to those values, and to those existing customers. So it's actually adding more and more efforts to the same product. At the same time, if you're going to innovate and do a new product, you're going to put in standards, you're going to put rules for those, and others are expected to follow it and interoperate with you. So it actually, as we used to talk in internet economies and the model, the network effect. This is actually a network effect business. This is a network effect business in action for so many years, not just now. And it is actually one of the best examples for that. So I would say that the context-wise, I think there can't be a better timing than this. And again, it has come in a time where so many transactions are happening digitally, especially, I mean, I can't thank COVID, but it has at least compelled and forced habits, not just in the consumers, but also in the merchants to start accepting things digitally. Because people are not stepping out, even for their daily smaller things like breads, like vegetables. So the best thing that I like in today's time is that the number of transactions are increasing rapidly. The transactions which are getting used, or let's say which are being done with very high frequency, like literally daily, or even one couple of times a day, food items, etc., are all getting used, or let's say all are using digital payments. At the same time, it's actually taking out a lot of interesting ideas and issues that are emerging with that experience. So it also means that if there are more players come with the fresh thinking, they could actually start solving each one of those problems. And we can see a very massive adoption from the consumers for these kind of products and for these new models that will come in. Now, what could you expect in this kind of a scenario? We kind of just briefly went through the context that why these entities being even proposed to set up, why the license is being opened up. The simple answer is that a huge opportunity, a lot needs to be done. Still about 20, 30 years to go before we even reach some sort of a sane maturity in this business. The entities, again, the same question comes in that NPCI is already strong. There is Visa, there is MasterCard. The new entity will, while they will have advantage of being for profit, but they will literally have no support, or let's say no business that you would get guaranteed. Like NPCI had some advantage while they were not profit, but they had some startup in form of let's say some ATM switch business, etc. So it is actually well-balanced model, I would put in this way. All these entities will be on their own, which means they will have to really think about the merit of the use cases, the products that they are going to bring in, which I expect that the focus will be on expanding the market. Of course, RBI also had talked about a little bit of a de-risking. My personal belief always has been that the de-risking on an existing product is more of a technology and a process and certain standard related challenges, not so much as the number of entity challenge, which can still be achieved. But I believe that some of the entities may even look at it, but entities like us, and I believe that more entities would try and focus on the white spaces. There are still plenty of spaces when we're talking 85% consumption still being done in cash. That means there are plenty of use cases where there's no digital. It's simply physical cash, which means we need to find solutions which can integrate, bring those customers and bring those use cases and bring the entire supply chain and a value chain of those use cases into the digital fold, which means a massive work is required. Now, to make it slightly simpler and give you example, we talk, and it is not necessarily, I also keep saying always that this is not necessarily a issue of geography as much, that it is a problem of rural, it's not a problem of urban. It may be to an extent where the infra play or internet connectivity is concerned, but other than that, it is money is actually you have a demography issue. So the digital payment is more of a demography issue than a geography issue. Even in a rural area, you have a people with money and you have people with lesser money, and the relevance is different, but they all want to spend money. So this is more about demography, that as you go to a diversified demography, the use cases, how they use kind of those digital payment option is very different. And the solutions required for them is very different. So I was giving you example of an organized industry, which is fairly large, regulated, microfinance. I mean, you're talking about at least 30,000 crore plus book every month, and most of it actually gets collected and dispersed in cash, barring few companies who manage to kind of digitize a lot of it. I'm not saying solutions are not there, but there is something missing. That's why the adoption has not taken, and it's not yet 100% digital. So this is just one example. If you really kind of keep going into segment by segment, you keep going by use case, you keep going to a specific customer segment by segment, there are still many places which can be called white spaces where a unique solution can still be built. I've always believed that payment is not as much about giving out a product and say, hey, this product can be used for everything. It's not about giving one debit card, one credit card, one IMPS or one UPI. It's more about the use cases and customizing your products to be able to take care of those specific use cases. And which means that even if you have to create hundreds of products to meet those specific use cases, one shouldn't shy away from it. So I've always said that payment should not be looked as a product problem, but should be looked at a product and solutions kind of opportunity, and focused on a specific use cases and a specific customers. And it varies. Even if you look at it in your own lifestyle, and if you really analyze that when you spend money, where do you pay cash? Where do you pay debit card? Where do you pay credit card? Which particular card? You will realize that instinctively in each of those scenarios, there is a very detailed subconscious decision making that you're using, and you actually like to use different things. So as we say, different courses for different horses, and that's exactly what is expected out of these different entities. I think RBI is looking at digitizing or having a less cash society as much as possible, which means we genuinely have to go and expand the market. And expanding the market again goes back to the same things I said: more use cases, more products plus solutions, and more different kind of a customer segment that we need to go. Also, one more point I would say, that why I'm alluding to more and more product plus solution approach is because your first 10 crore to 15 crore customers had a lot more homogeneous habits. They were a lot more similar in their education profile, understanding, digitization journey, their understanding of the, let's say, money matters. They had a lot more similarities. The moment you're going to go down to the next 500 million, you're actually talking about probably micro to mini micro segments of at least 8 to 10 types. And they are not homogeneous, they are heterogeneous, which again means that you have to deal with them very differently. To give you one small example from my earlier life in its case, which I founded, most of our customers were actually relevant because they were actually came on board for a train ticket booking. And most of us here on the platform probably would not really think of that as a bigger problem or that as a bigger requirement. But let's not forget that 70 to 80% of the population today needs that kind of a solution. And we could get to them because those were the solution we were providing. So we're not providing something to buy e-commerce to those guys. That was less relevant, but some simple thing like train ticket, simple thing like a temple donation. So the audience use case and the use of a payment products is very different. And you have to actually think of that as a very different kind of a solution and approach to those customers. And I think in this journey, when these entities come in, that is exactly what you will see. One of the questions that was I was asked to kind of comment on was on what is the impact that you're likely to see on the ecosystem. My belief is that the impact that you will see in the ecosystem is not just the payment ecosystem limited to end customer, merchant, banks, non-bank license holders, and in between, let's say, entities. You actually, payment is a horizontal. I mean, I always call it that the way you have blood in your body and it moves and it impacts your entire body, money moves in your economy, and anything wrong with the money can actually collapse the economy. So if that's an analogy, everything in an economy where money is involved or wherever the money flows, you have actually an impact possible. So I believe that the impact is going to be at the complete economy level. And that's where I started that it's a journey towards being a digital India, and digital cash has to happen. If digital cash has to happen, we have to identify more and more solution, more products, more segments, and that's what we have to do. So my belief is that the impact would not just be on the ecosystem. Ecosystem would actually play a role in reaching out to the entire economy, all the use cases, all the customers, and probably create a lot of digitized journey. Also, I would say that we generally tend to follow all the payment entities, the natural behavior or a natural digital adoption behavior of the consumers. And the natural journey so far in every segment has been that the customer adopts first for the communication, then adopts into, let's say, information, then adopts into entertainment, and then goes on to commerce. And the moment the customers start using these, or let's say start opening for the commerce, the payment rules start coming in. And different segment of customers look at that journey in a different stages. So when they are introduced to the first, second, third, it's just that every segment, new segment, you actually go into this journey, the cycle of reaching to the commerce and the digital payment gets shortened because of the rapid adoption nature that is getting trickled down. And as the more and more access, more information reaching down there. So that's an advantage that we need to take. I believe that we are open for some questions. So if there's a coordinator who could probably, if there are audience questions, they can take up. Otherwise, I think I was asked for 10, 12 minutes. I've finished broad macro points. If Mr. Mohota wants to add anything, it will be my pleasure to hear him as well.
I guess there seem to be no questions, and looks like the message was clearly delivered, and which is why no questions. That said, thank you so much, sir. I must say it was again insightful enough.